This month, the key trends in automotive retail have been really rather complex and really quite exciting in some respects, but also rather scary. Let's look at new car sales first of all. The new car market during October has had a bit of a stall. New car sales for the month are down 6%, which was probably more than people had expected. Year on year, we're still up by 3.3%, and that's a positive. But when we look at that in a little bit more detail, we see that the large degree of drop has come from the private buyer. So 11.8% drop for private sales. Fleet market has remained remarkably consistent at 1.7% down. So, that could be expected as normal during the course of a month. And when we look at the small businesses, you're looking at a drop of 12.8%. Important to note that battery electric vehicle sales as a percentage of total market were at 20.6%, so that's higher than they have been. But we're still only seeing a picture of 18.1% of EV sales over the course of the year. And that is a concern as we head into the rest of the year, because, of course, we've got to head towards that target of 22%. There is a significant amount of OEM support for battery electric vehicles at the moment, uncommonly high, unsustainable, one could argue. And I fear that that is only going to get worse as we head towards the end of the year. So that can come in two forms, I guess. So there'll be the OEM support. But I think in terms of trying to keep monthly payments down on a vehicle, we're also going to be seeing some rather optimistic future residual values set on those vehicles. So that is a potential problem 2, 3, 4 years down the line when those PCP contracts come towards an end. Let's talk a little bit more about the budget, because that has had a significant impact on the automotive sector. It's actually had a significant impact on businesses nationwide. But the biggest shock, I think, here was the level of the increase in national insurance payments that the businesses are going to have to find to keep the number of staff they've got in place, to be honest with you. Other things we should be aware of, the government have looked at redressing what's going on with the ECOS company car schemes. And I think they're going to put that to right. And I think that means closing a gap there that has resulted in lower taxation for many people using company vehicles. The other thing that has happened in the budget is that the government have come back on to pickup trucks, which earlier in the year, the Conservative government had turned that taxation into the same as a private company vehicle. That was then retracted, but Labour put that back in place. Now that will hit a lot of small businesses, a lot of sole traders who rely on that vehicle to be their workhorse as well as a car for themselves. And that could have a really big impact on the volume of sales within that market. And of course, the people that have got those vehicles already. Coming back to what's happened with the national insurance, and it's not just the increase in national insurance that's going to cost the problem. We've also got the increase in minimum wage. And for some of the remarketing companies, some of the smaller businesses, that increase is going to have a significant impact, not just on their bottom line for those people, but also for the people that sit in roles that are above them. Because all of a sudden you're getting to a position where you have a manager who will then have a more junior member of staff that's earning almost the same as them. And the impact on that, then, it rolls upwards through the chain and hierarchy. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. We've got a lot of businesses saying that this could affect the number of people that they employ. It could affect their operational efficiency because they have to drop the number of staff. So actually could be more negative than we actually think. And we could be sitting not just at potential job losses, but we could actually find that for some businesses, it's just too much and they have to close down, which would be terribly sad if that were the case. Another thing on the taxation there is also some concern around what's happened with the inheritance tax. So the inheritance tax has now changed so that should somebody die within a family-run dealer group, and the taxation, therefore, on that set of circumstances would mean a significant tax bill. The question is, where's the money going to come from to fund that? The other big thing that's happened, of course, is the rather surprising verdict that was given around finance lending. And that has also had a big impact in the last week or so of the month. The net result was that several lenders pulled finance provision almost immediately after that hearing. Now, we've moved a little bit further down the line, and the problem is still there. but lenders are lending, which is a good thing. And of course, this has to be resolved quickly because you can't have a car market if you can't lend. The negative side of it for the dealers, obviously, is that for some lenders, they are still financing vehicles, but what they're saying is that it is at this interest rate and this rate only, and you're not getting any commission payment. Now, when you start to look at some of the businesses that operate on very small margin on the metal, and they work with a larger amount of income from finance and insurance products, this is a significant problem right now. So there has to be a solution found. Some lenders have been able to put in documentation and processes into their systems, which has meant that it is very clear to the consumer that they're having to pay for an introduction and so forth, because this is not just a finance company problem, it's a broker problem as well. But putting that documentation, those processes in place where the consumer has to e-sign to allow them to facilitate the deal to go through, that's the important thing that's in place and is enabling transactions to take place. But for that week period, there were a number of businesses that all of a sudden had a huge cash flow issue because, of course, they weren't selling the cars that they'd already agreed to do it. I think this overall is a strange situation for the industry to be in. I think ultimately it's going to cost the consumer more money to be able to buy a car because, of course, there will be court cases. They have to be funded and there has to be provision put aside for payments to those people where genuinely there has been a misdemeanor committed by the lender or the dealer or so forth. But in addition to that, regulation is great, and we do look after the consumer very, very carefully in this country. But actually, it has to cost somebody. The interesting thing, listening to a webinar the other day, which was quite a shocker for me and quite surprising, was somebody asked a question: how long is it going to be before we have to disclose the profit we make per unit? So that is a really strange thought, that at some point someone somewhere might say, please, Mr. Dealer, you have to declare how much profit per unit you're making. Is it possible? I don't know. I'm not the expert here, and I would suggest to everybody that they seek further advice to make sure that they've got proper clarity around these changes in finance and obviously around the national insurance contributions. During the last month, we have seen some mild changes in what's been going on in our data, perhaps less than I might have expected. But what I can say is that in terms of the total number of vehicles that we're seeing in the market, we've seen an increase of 3%. Now, that probably reflects slowdown that we've talked about in new car sales, but also a little bit of a slowdown in used car sales. When you look at some of the chats and some of the dealer forums, you can see that there are a number of dealers out there that are really struggling and have really struggled over the past few weeks. And as a result of that, I think sales have drifted back for some people. And I think that the reflection of that is that there are more cars in market because they're not turning as quickly. There are more EVs in market. I'm not so concerned about that because I think that is a reflection of the natural state of affairs. More cars sold, therefore there are more coming up as used vehicles. So that's perfectly normal, but it's important to note that that's taken place. In terms of pricing, last month we saw an increase in price for EVs, and that's been the same this month as well. So overall, we've seen an increase in price of about 1.2%. Now, I will caveat that with that could be a flex in the age of the vehicle that we've got showing on our platform. So if you've got more newer vehicles coming into the market, you'll naturally see an increase in the retail price. When we look at the type of vehicles that have been selling, last month we saw an increase in the number of delisted vehicles between 10 and 17K. So that's changed over the last month. And for October, we've seen that delisted vehicles have increased in the 7 to 10K price bracket, but also in the 20 to 25K. So some slight nuances in the market, which is to be expected as the months go by, but important to note those. In terms of days to sale, those have increased slightly. Again, in line with what we've just been talking about. And where we were at 42 days to sale last month as an overall average, that's now at 44 days. So a slight increase, 2 days. And it's also done the same thing for electric vehicles. That's increased from 28 during September to 30 during October. So everything's just slowing down a little bit. And the one final thing I'm going to touch on is that there's been a decrease in the number of new petrol cars for sale. Now, it's only a minimal 0.5% in volume terms, but I find that quite interesting. I don't know whether that's because there have been more petrol vehicles sold and more EVs coming to the marketplace, but it's just a point. And we'll keep an eye on that and see what happens next month. Normally, I would say there's just one challenge, but in the last month, I think it's obvious that there are two challenges. Firstly, the ability for them to be able to place finance and actually transact deals. And secondly, it's the money, it's the increase that they're having to find for the cost of national insurance and the extra taxation that's come from the government. As you know, AutoGrab are always trying to find ways to help the dealer. In this instance, we can't help with the finance problem. That's something that has to be worked out between the dealer and between the finance providers. However, when it comes to costs, AutoGrab is there to be able to try and help dealers manage their costs better anyway. I would urge that at the moment, the thing that you need to look at is how you're sourcing vehicles, how you're driving leads into the business, because that's where you need to be focusing your attention to make sure your business is making as much money as possible. Now, finding that right stock is essential, and every business should be cognizant of how they're finding their cars and where they're being bought from. So, analysis around which is the best market vertical to buy from is essential. You need to understand where your costs are higher. Is that through buying through auctions? Is that buying through a remarketing platform? Or is that buying from a private vendor? Once you understand that, you can begin to focus your activity on that market vertical to be able to ensure you're making the most money you can from the vehicle and that you're being as effective and efficient as possible. You need to make sure you're in that position to be able to identify cars that are cheaper in market than other vehicles so that you can buy those, reprocess them, and offer them for sale once they've been through the appropriate preparation channels and then put to market. It's essential that you understand that you buy with the minimum cost and retail at the maximum level. So using the AutoGrab sourcing product gives you access to be able to see the market overall in real time. You'll be able to identify not only what cars are being sold by dealers and at what price, but you'll also be able to see what vehicles are being advertised privately and identify and focus on those vehicles because those are the cars that you can probably buy more cost efficiently and then offer those to your retail consumer through your outlets. We have customers that are successfully using this product and are benefiting from the reduced costs that using the sourcing tool facilitates. We have one customer that is buying over 10 cars a day using the AutoGrab platform. It's clear that in finding those vehicles, maximizing profit, you're going to be able to offset some of that increased national insurance cost. The other thing I'll mention is we have a product called Recapture. Now, Recapture is essentially a silent prospector that takes data from your previous sales and puts it into the platform, which then constantly monitors when those vehicles come up for retail sale. At that point, you are automatically fired a lead, which is a vehicle that is on sale, which gives you the opportunity to make contact with the vendor of that car and either find them a new car or buy back something that you sold them a year, 2 years before that you can then resell once again. You know the vehicle, you prepped it, so it's a good car. You obviously wanted it before. And this all goes on in the background. You don't have to do anything. So that's minimizing your operational cost and giving leads straight into your inbox in real time. We actually have one customer that is gaining 18 leads a week from the Recapture platform. My top tip for the next month is all about data. Data is essential to improve your business. We know that. It's been proven. However, if data is free, there's a reason for that. Now, AutoGrab data will cost you money, but it will give you the opportunity for a significant ROI. And the AutoGrab platform and services will facilitate enhanced profits if it's used correctly. That's going to help you offset the cost increase that you've had from government taxation. So think about data, spend the money, reap the reward.